Just a little review to navigate where we are in our narration. Last week, we read the pastime of Lord Varaha's actual fight and killing of Hiranyaksha, who was previously one of the Vaikuntha gatekeepers who had been cursed by the four Kumaras when they tried to enter into Vaikuntha. So even further back than that, what's happened in the narration, and we'll get there soon, because half of this week's review is for this final ending of that chapter 19. And the other half of this review will be all the way back to the beginning of the first canto.
Third canto.
Third canto, sorry.
Yeah.
which is when Vidura met Uddhava. But to go back into the discussion between Vidura and Maitreya, what happened was that Vidura asked about the creation. Maitreya narrated all the way up to the point of the creation of Manu and his wife Sadarupa. And then there was a conversation about what Manu's duties were to help direct humanity through his Manu Samhita and various Vedic instructions. And Manu asked, fine, I'll carry out your order to Brahma, but what should I do about this planet that has fallen into the ocean, into the Garbhodaka ocean? So since that question arose and that time period, we've been reading about the advent of Lord Varaha. So now let us continue the end of that narration at the end of that chapter 19. I'll put up the text.
I would like to ask first, who is Dr. Tara Devi? Can you say hello? Tara Devi? No response. Okay.
Jai, please mute if you're not speaking. This is Srimad-Bhagavatam, June 2022, lessons 5 and 6, starting with chapter 19, text 27. Aja, Brahma, and others arrived on the spot to see the fearfully tusked demon lying on the ground, biting his lip. The glow of his face was yet unfaded, and Brahma admiringly said, "Oh, who could meet such a blessed death?" Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Although the demon was dead, his bodily luster was unfaded. This is very peculiar, because when a man or animal is dead, the body immediately becomes pale, the luster gradually fades, and decomposition takes place. But here, although Hiranyaksha lay dead, his bodily luster was unfaded, because the Lord, the Supreme Spirit, was touching his body. One's bodily luster remains fresh only as long as the spirit soul is present. Samapriya, you want to take over?
Okay. Hare Krishna, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to this Transcendental Sangha. Let's start with Vaishnavi. Would you like to read?
Okay. So, Brahma's...
Madhurya, wait a second. Madhurya, do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, but the purport was exactly what I wanted to ask. Somebody was telling me this week that when they exhume bodies for some reason, or whatever the reason may be, that they have noticed that the nails and hair have grown. What do you have to say about that?
It's just the reaction. The body is, it's like the fan, as far as my understanding goes. It's just a reaction. Is there a doctor in our midst? What is the medical reason for that? Madhurya, you're a nurse.
As my understanding is, as soon as the soul leaves, there's no growth, right? It's the
Well,
body
no,
dies.
sometimes that I've heard that before, that there is some residual growth.
Isn't
Anyone
there
else
some
has-
twitching
there are.
also?
I'm sorry.
Wait a minute,
Isn't it-
Midoriya. Go on.
Isn't there sometimes some twitching of a body, even though death
Yeah.
has occurred?
Those are just nervous reactions of the the nervous system. There's
same.
biochemical beings inside the body, so they are there's something going on. But this is talking about years after they exhume a body, they've seen that the nails and hair grow.
Do they actually grow long, Midoriya? Like
Yeah,
long hair,
that's what-
long nails? Wow.
Yeah, that's what
Well,
somebody
in the
said.
same way that you're saying that we're not the only one in this body. This is like, we're the main entity in this body, but there are different creatures inside of this body. There are atom size. There are worms and bugs and other living entities inside the body, and so that movement can be a reaction. I'm sure years later it wasn't continuing to grow, but it had grown. We see that it had grown. Anyway, that's the material in nature is fantastic. But now is that all right? Otherwise, you can do some research. I don't. That's
I'll do some research.
you
But
should
I'm
do
just
some
wondering
research.
if you had any ideas about that.
That's what I'm thinking. Okay, thank you for that. And Vaishnavi, why don't you read?
Okay. Srimad-Bhagavatam 3.19, 28 and 29. Brahma continued, he was struck by a foot of the Lord, whom yogis, seeking freedom from their unreal material bodies, meditate upon in seclusion and mystic trance. While gazing on his countenance, this crest jewel of Diti's sons has cast off his mortal coil. These two personal assistants of Supreme Lord, having been cursed, have been destined to take birth in demoniac families. After a few such births, they will return to their own positions. Purport. Particularly mentioned in this verse is the word yam, or unto whom, indicating that meditation should be targeted on the personality of Godhead. Even if one concentrates his mind on the boar form of the Lord, that is also yoga. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, one who concentrates his mind constantly in meditation upon this personality of Godhead in one of his many varieties of forms is a first-class yogi, and he can very easily attain trance simply by meditating upon the form of the Lord. If one is able to continue such meditation on Lord's form at the time of one's death, one is liberated from this mortal body and is transferred to the kingdom of God. This opportunity was given to the demon by the Lord, and therefore Brahma and other demigods were astonished. In other words, the perfection of yoga practice can be attained by a demon also, if he is simply kicked by the Lord. I have hope.
Yeah. Who would want that glorious kick? What's another time when someone was kicked by another incarnation of Krishna? First thing that comes to my mind, anyone know? When Lord Nityananda kicked, who was that, Pati?
Shivananda Sen.
Shivananda Sen. He kicked Shivananda Sen. That was also mercy. We just read another one, how Radharani kicked Tulsi Manjari, and she wore that sign of her kick at proud, that she was a marked person kicked by the lotus foot of Srimati Radharani. Anything else you want to say about this? What about the meditation on the form of the Lord? What does that remind you of? So many different ones.
Just
I'll give you a hint. Shikshastika. Faye, you know? Unmute, sweetie. Unmute.
No, Mataji, I was just going to ask a question.
Okay, you can ask. But I'll tell you, it's the second Shikshastika where Lord Chaitanya says you have so many names. The Lord has so many names. And why does he have so many names? Because there's so many different souls who have different relationships with him. Oh, my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction. And thus you have hundreds and millions of names. So that's variety. Okay, Faye?
My question goes back to the verse. It uses a phrase that I'm not familiar with. The one that she just, the phrase mortal coil. What is
The
mortal
mortal
coil? I mean, I thought of Kundalini, and that is coiled, but I didn't know what this means.
Anyone want to say? Hati, you want to answer?
It's the material body. It's coiled around, you know, it's just in that sense, it's just called that in this particular feature, in this particular sentence. But that's basically what it's talking about.
Even the Kundalini is material. I mean, we use it to realize Krishna, but you know, it's just anything that has
It's
to do.
a mortal coil. A coil means something that's wrapped around something else. So it's wrapped around, in a sense, it's encaging the spirit soul. And it was released. There was somebody else with a Chetamai.
Haribol.
Sama, do you have a cough drop? Might want to take one.
Good
Oh,
morning,
sorry.
everyone. My question is regarding the final purport. It says, even if one concentrates his mind on the pure form of the Lord, that is also yoga. So isn't it part of our mission is to discover our Ishtadeva and then stay with that? Or do we have the freedom to just on any particular day go with this form of the Lord, one day Matsya, one day Nrsimhadev, like that?
That's a good question.
Actually, interestingly, we're also with a group of devotees reading the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And we're at the part of the book now where Gopakumar is in Vaikuntha. But although he's in Vaikuntha, there's still a heartstring pull for him to want to go to Vrindavan, even though he's in Vaikuntha. And while he's there, Narada Muni comes to him and says, I've never seen this before, how someone comes to Vaikuntha and isn't satisfied, because everyone's satisfied here. Please explain to me why you're so distraught, why you don't look happy and blissful all the time. So Gopakumar was revealing to his spiritual master, to an advanced devotee, just the way Vyasadeva did when he was not feeling fulfilled. He was explaining himself to Narada Muni. So in his explanations to Gopakumar about his feelings, it's quite lengthy, but within that context, he talks about how some residents of Vaikuntha stay with one particular form of the Lord. That's their Istadeva, as Chetamai was just saying, and it's eternally connected and satisfied with that particular form of the Lord. And the most common, well-known one is Hanuman. Even though he knows about Krishna, he knows about Vrindavan, he knows about the gopis, he's still very satisfied with Lord Ram, because that's his Istadeva, his worshipable deity. But Narada also explained that there are some residents of Vaikuntha that actually take different forms and worship different forms of the Lord at different times. So it's because the Lord is unlimited, his devotees are also unlimited, his forms are unlimited, and the relationships between them all are all unlimited. So it's not a strict one way or another. It's the bottom line.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu.
Many different relationships exist with the Lord and the Jiva. So everything is available, really. Okay, let's go on. Thank you for that. Faye, why don't you read?
Hare Krishna. Good morning, Mataji. Srimad-Bhagavatam 3.19.30. The demigods address the Lord. All obeisances unto you. You are the enjoyer of all sacrifices, and you have assumed the form of a boar in pure goodness, for the purpose of maintaining the world. Fortunately for us, this demon, who was a torment to the worlds, has been slain by you, and we too, O Lord, are now at ease in devotion to your lotus feet. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is said here that the form of the Lord is pure goodness, which means that it is not material. In the material world, there is no pure goodness. In the Bhagavatam, the stage of pure goodness is called Sattvan Vishyatam. Vishyatam means pure. In pure goodness, there is no contamination by the two inferior qualities, namely passion and ignorance. Therefore, the form of the boar in which the Lord appeared is nothing of the material world. There are many other forms of the Lord, but none of them belong to the material qualities. Such forms are non-different from the Vishnu form, and Vishnu is the enjoyer of all sacrifices.
Thank you, Faye. Do you want to you have any realizations about that?
Just a side point, so often in the material world, we have exposure to what is considered quote unquote goodness, but it's always contaminated, it's always mixed. We see the modes of passion. It might be cross-contaminated or mixed at times with a little bit of goodness and so forth. But the Lord is pure goodness. He is transcendentally pure and uncontaminated.
Good, good. So that material coil, that anything to do with the material world is part of the material coil. Very good. Thank you. Let's go on with Tisha reading. Tisha?
Yes, thank you, Mataji. Srimad
Hare
Bhagavatam,
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, 3:19:31. Sri Maitreya continued. After thus killing the most formidable demon, Hiranyaksha, the Supreme Lord Hari, the origin of the boar species, returned to his own abode, where there is always an uninterrupted festival. The Lord was praised by all the demigods headed by Brahma. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. This verse confirms the statement in Bhagavad Gita that the Lord appears as he is from his transcendental abode for the sake of killing the miscreants and saving the devotees. By killing the demon Hiranyaksha, he fulfilled his promise to kill the demons and always protect the demigods headed by Brahma. The statement that the Lord returned to his own abode indicates that he has his own particular transcendental residence. Since he is full of all energies, he is all-pervasive in spite of his residing in Goloka Vrindavan, just as the sun, although situated in a particular place within the universe, is present by its sunshine throughout the universe.
Okay. Is that clear? Do you want to say something about that?
I just love that it's always an interrupted festival, and to just feel like there's a place where there's joy and happiness, and just like Faye was saying, uncontaminated goodness, or the happiness and joy of things.
Right. The three qualities of the spiritual world: as opposed to the three qualities of the material world? Who can say, Gopa? Gopa G, you there?
Yeah, but I'm laughing that you called on me.
Uh-oh.
I eternity, bliss, and knowledge. I don't know.
That's it. Eternity,
Oh, it
bliss,
is.
and knowledge. So there
Oh,
you
okay.
go. That's the spiritual world. So that's a nice guarantee. As opposed to misery,
Birth, death, and
temporary.
disease. Yeah.
Yeah, birth, death, and disease.
death.
But misery, temporary, and everyone's ignorant. So the choice is ours where we want to go. The festival seems pretty good to me. I'm with Tisha. Okay, good. Let's go on. Midoriya, would you like to read?
Sure. Srimad-Bhagavatam 3:19-32. My dear Vidura, I have explained to you the personality of Godhead's coming down as the first Boar incarnation and killing in a great fight a demon of unprecedented prowess, as if he were just a plaything. This has been narrated by me as I heard it from my predecessor, spiritual master. Report. Here, the sage Maitreya admits that he explained this incident of the killing of Hiranyaksha by the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a straight narration. He did not manufacture anything or add interpretation, but explained whatever he had heard from his spiritual master. Thus he accepted as bona fide the system of the parampara, or receiving the transcendental message in disciplic succession. Unless received by this bona fide process of hearing from a spiritual master, the statement of an acharya or preceptor cannot be valid.
So this is a really, really important point. You want to explain this further, Madhurya Ji? This is like the, go on.
It's very important that we, whatever we hear is in the line of disciplic succession. Prabhupada would talk about, Bhagavad Saptas by people who did it more for economic reasons. So he said that's, we can't hear from people like that. We'll get contaminated. So we need to hear from persons in the disciplic succession.
Yeah, there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita that one should approach the spiritual master because he has seen the truth, right?
Yes.
434, I think it is. So,
Yeah.
so this is what we stress all the time. Be careful who we hear from. Use our intelligence to seek out that pure devotee, that perfect person to hear from. And then we can hear completely and with faith, and because then we can be vulnerable. Otherwise, we are vulnerable to everything that we're hearing and we're affected by it. So we really want to be careful to hear the truth from disciplic succession, how the self-realized soul has heard from his spiritual master, who is a self-realized soul, who has heard from his spiritual master, who is a self-realized soul, all the way back to Lord Brahma hearing from Krishna. Pati.
I have a question regarding this. We were just hearing in the last few verses about the nature of the transcendental world, which is uncontaminated by the modes of material nature. Now, as years go by, just like with that telephone game, if somebody tells something to one person, then he tells it to another, she tells it to another, she tells it. By the time it gets down the line, it's no longer exactly the same as it was when it first started. That's the nature of narrations, especially in this world. So oftentimes, I've heard people giving classes in the temples, narrating different pastimes. And although there might not be something you can put your finger on it, it's maybe not the way I heard it previously or have read it directly in the book. There's embellishments which are being inserted by the narrator. Now, is that okay? Or is that not something that should be done?
It's not okay. It needs to be, this came up recently. Well, it came up recently in class. I think it was maybe Nagaraj Prabhu's class or somebody. Yeah, they said everything needs to be referenced, whatever you say in class or otherwise. It's not like Prabhupada said, but then you have to say where it came from.
Yeah, Prabhupada said
I
that
mean,
also. Good.
that's professional, and it's that's how it is in the academic world. You can't just say something in writing and
Good.
not back it up.
There's a verse that Prabhupada, that I always quote also, of course I don't exactly remember it, that Prabhupada said that in spiritual circles, one must always quote from authority, just to back up your points. So this is an important point, I would think. Good, very excellent. So we're all on board with hearing from, oh, are you, Jayashree, did you?
I
Okay,
have
yeah, go on, Sri.
So what do devotees do that have been initiated by Prabhupada disciples who are no longer in the movement? They've fallen, and
Okay,
what
so
is that?
that's also something that confuses people. Srila Prabhupada arranged this movement. He is the Acharya. He is the Acharya. He has written these books. He has presented this transcendental knowledge. He is a Vaikuntha man. He is perfect. He's the perfect living being. So, and we are conditioned souls. So if someone, for some reason or other, becomes victimized by the material modes of nature, his teachings are still there. Prabhupada's teachings are still there. So we can, and also the person representing Prabhupada is teaching what Prabhupada has given him. This is his disciple will be teaching what he has given. So if the disciple has unfortunately left for whatever reason, even if the spiritual master passes away, Srila Prabhupada has arranged this movement that we can always take shelter of his books, because he is the Shiksha Guru for all of the disciples. And the Shiksha Guru, sometimes even if you do studies in our Sampradaya, is just as important as the Diksha Guru. The Diksha Guru initiates us into this line of Krishna, into the Sampradaya, into this line of disciplic succession. And the Shiksha Guru, which could be more than one, teaches this transcendental knowledge. So
does that explain your question, Jayashree? Is that what you were asking? Unmute.
Unmute, sweetie, unmute.
I kind of was thinking like that, but I feel like there's a connection missing, like a link missing. So you're, in the line of parampara, but then somebody in between fell off. So you just connect to Prabhupada and Prabhupada's books.
Well, you connect you're still a member of that link. That link is still there. Once you connect, and then when you connect with Prabhupada, you're still connecting with all of the devotees. And there are many devotees who have become Shiksha Guru to people in that situation.
Are you asking, Jayashree, if their initiation remains bona fide? Is that the question?
I guess that could be there too. I mean, I've heard some initiated by one who fell, and then initiated by a second one who fell. And it's like, so how do they handle that? I mean, I guess
right. So for good reference points, if you wanted to look it up, or I can share with you an email some quotes. The very first chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita is called The Spiritual Masters. Okay. And in that there's an awful lot about the parampara, about the difference or similarities between the Siksha and the Diksha Gurus. And there's many statements there, if you read it, really read it scrutinizingly, that pretty much cover all these different points.
Okay.
So I'll send you some of those that I've compiled, and then you can look for it further.
This is a very, very wonderful discussion. So it's always welcomed if we bring it up. But I think that we're going to go on now and ask Sesha Ji. Sesha, could you read?
Okay. Okay. Srimad-Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 19, Text 33 and 34. Sri Sutta Goswami continued. My dear Brahmana, Shata, Vidura, The great devotee of the Lord achieved transcendental bliss by hearing the narration of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from the authoritative source of the sage Kosarava Maitreya, and he was very pleased. But to speak of hearing the pastimes of the Lord, whose chest is marked with Srivatsa, people may take transcendental pleasure even in hearing of the works and deeds of the devotees, whose fame is immortal. Purport. Bhagavatam literally means the pastimes of the Lord and the Lord's devotees. For example, there are pastimes of Lord Krishna and narrations of devotees like Prahlad, Dhruva, and Maharaj Ambarish. Both pastimes pertain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead because the devotees' pastimes are in relation with him. The Mahabharata, for example, the history of the Pandavas and their activities, is sacred because the Pandavas had a direct relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
I have a question, Sesha.
Yes.
This is showing, it's actually can be linked a little bit with Jayashree's question. Now, it is very important to hear about also the devotees of the Lord and how their activities are transcendental, and the whole Bhagavatam is also about the devotees of the Lord. So when we see the manifestation of devotees of the Lord in the material world, and as Jayashree mentioned, sometimes unfortunately the devotee might go away, and someone is actually emulating their activities. How do we see that? This is a loaded question. I guess it's a continuation from what Jayashree said, but I don't know, reading about the devotees of the Lord, which devotees of the Lord?
Well, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed in his daily reading of the Srimad-Bhagavatam that he would like to hear the story. It's either Dhruva Maharaj or Prahlad Maharaj again and again. They would read it again and again. And that's far from the Krishna's Leela, not far from, but you understand what I'm saying?
Different ras, different mood.
Yeah, a different mood between that and the gopis' relationship with Krishna described in the 10th canto. And so yeah.
So any hearing of any pastime of the devotees or the pure devotees in the Supreme Lord, that's to be considered, that is most purifying and most auspicious.
Very well stated.
Hare Krishna. And it doesn't matter if, like what Chaita was saying about our Istadev, who people might be wondering, but the thing is that when we purify ourselves and through our chanting and hearing and appreciating Krishna and all of his pastimes, it will be awakened. It will be awakened naturally. I just read it today in the Vajramahasya that hearing about Krishna will and chanting Hare Krishna, this will purify us and awaken our natural constitutional position and relationship with him.
Well, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that, doesn't it? Just by following the procedure of hearing and chanting, that gradually things like our Istadev or our eternal position in Krishna Lila, that will all be revealed.
Yeah, that's very a wonderful point and welcomed. There are other schools of devotees who don't follow that. They and that's very confusing sometimes. So this is safe. Prabhupada has given us everything safe. Bhaktivinoda has given us Bhaktisiddhanta. We are in a very safe position. Just keep chanting and serving. Excuse me. Thank you, Sesha. Pati.
One point that's kind of interesting is that now this narration of Srimad-Bhagavatam reverts all the way back to the sages of Naimisharanya, and we see that Sutta Goswami is actually speaking. It just kind of brings the whole thing back in the weave of the tapestry so that we know where we are. And this point here that Bhagavatam literally means the pastimes of the Lord and the Lord's devotees. So this is a point that's being made by Sutta Goswami, that even hearing the deeds of his devotees is transcendental. Here's the next one. Sama, who's next?
Who I would like to check to my but I was trying to find out who Dr. Tara Devi is, if she would say hello for a second, so that I. Dr. Tara, I guess she's not responding. Okay. How about Cheta? Would you like to read?
Yes, Mata, thank you. Dandavat pranam, everyone. Srimad-Bhagavatam 3:19, 35, and 36. The personality of Godhead delivered the king of the elephants, who was attacked by an alligator, and who meditated upon the lotus feet of the Lord. At that time, the female elephants who accompanied him were crying, and the Lord saved them from the impending danger. What grateful soul is there who would not render his loving service to such a great master as the personality of Godhead? The Lord can be easily pleased by spotless devotees who resort exclusively to him for protection, though the unrighteous man finds it difficult to propitiate him. Srila Prabhupada's purport: every living entity, especially persons in the human race, must feel grateful for the benedictions offered by the grace of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, anyone with a simple heart of gratefulness must be Krishna conscious and offer devotional service to the Lord.
That's clear.
How beautiful and such a wonderful reminder. It seems like every day there's so many wonderful offerings that are given to us in our daily lives, and it's so easy to just overlook them and complain about what's lacking. Or personally, I just fall into that all the time. But I need to be reminded that gratitude is the attitude.
Yeah, just keep reading, keep chanting, and keep reading. That we have everything we need. Thank you. Okay. Jayashree, would you like to read?
Sure. Srimad-Bhagavatam 3:19, 37, and 38. O Brahmins, anyone who hears, chants, or takes pleasure in the wonderful narration of the killing of the Hiranyaksha demon by the Lord, who appeared as the first boar in order to deliver the world, is at once relieved of the results of sinful activities, even the killing of a Brahmin. This most sacred narrative confers extraordinary merit, wealth, fame, longevity, and all the objects of one's desire. On the field of battle, it promotes the strength of one's vital organs and organs of action. One who listens to it at the last moment of his life is transferred to the supreme abode of the Lord, O dear Shaunaka. Purport. Devotees are generally attracted by the narratives of the pastimes of the Lord, and even though they do not prosecute austerities or meditation, this very process of hearing attentively about the pastimes of the Lord will endow them with innumerable benefits, such as wealth, fame, longevity, and other desirable aims of life. If one continues to hear Srimad-Bhagavatam, which is full of narratives of the pastimes of the Lord, at the end of this life, one is sure to be transferred to the eternal transcendental abode of the Lord. Thus, hearers are benefited both ultimately and for as long as they are in the material world. That is the supreme sublime result of engaging in devotional service. The beginning of devotional service is to spare some time and listen to Srimad-Bhagavatam from the right source. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also recommended 5 items of devotional service, namely to serve the devotees of the Lord, to chant Hare Krishna, to hear Srimad-Bhagavatam, to worship the deity of the Lord, and to live in a place of pilgrimage. Just performing these 5 activities can deliver one from the miserable condition of material life. Thus ends Bhaktivedanta purports of the 3rd canto, 19th chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled The Killing of the Demon Hiranyaksha.
Okay, now I have a question. And it's funny that you were the one reading it. Could you put it back to the text, Patti?
Sure.
There, that last sentence, the last one of the 5, to live in a place of pilgrimage. So actually, I guess Alaska was becoming a place of pilgrimage. So many people are coming here for pilgrimage. But you have lived in the Dham for a long time, and now not living in the Dham. So is Alachua Dham, or what do you do when you're not living in the Dham? Are you not following one of the 5 most important things? I mean, many people are not living in the Holy Dham. How do we understand that?
Well, I guess wherever you are, it could be a holy Dham if Krishna's in the center and you're worshiping Krishna and doing those other things, serving the devotees, serving the deities, reading and chanting. It can be. It's just easier in the Dham, I think, to remember Krishna because you're there, although it's very purifying when you're there too. So,
right. That's true. But that gives us hope, though, because if we're not living in the Holy Dham physically, actually, Bhaktivinoda also said there, if you're just living there mentally, then that's just as good. It's just as good living in the Holy Dham mentally, better than someone who's living in the Dham and is thinking something else. So that's a really important thing to realize. And we have 2 questions here, Sesha and then Chaita. Sesha-ji, can I?
Yeah, my question is about the stress in this verse and the purport, just about hearing. Now, we're engaged in a process by the mercy of you two, where we're trying to understand and go deeper. But how much is it just hearing, or how much do we have to comprehend? Does that make a difference?
Very, very good. I always like to talk about hearing. There's different ways and different levels of hearing. You could hear something and then forget it. But we're learning through this process of how to read, how to hear from Srila Prabhupada. That's why I'm doing this. How to give this your full attention. There are different ways to hear, and if we open our consciousness up and we're right here, just like Jaishi was talking, we were talking about living in the Dham and how it's easier to become Krishna conscious. So, but we're not living in the Dham. Most of us. So you have to be absorbed in the Dham internally, and reading Prabhupada's books. There's different ways to read. You read deeply. You think about it. How come I got a question for you. How come you're reading the same things you read 50 years ago? We're still reading Prabhupada's books. What does that mean? Sesha?
Well, it means we haven't got all the gems out of it yet, at least individually.
Yeah. Good. Is there ever going to be a time when we can actually get all the gems out of the Bhagavatam? I know that. We hear a lot of people say, I read that already. Is there what do you think about that one?
No, Chaitanya is answering. She's shaking her head no.
Okay. So this is an endless mine. Chaita? Thank you, Sesha.
Thank you. Great answer. Shesha, I was thinking on book distribution, sometimes you offer a Gita to someone and said, oh yeah, I read that in college. I mean, my gosh, it's like you haven't read it at all if you dismiss it like that. But so I just had a quick question about.
But let's just go back to that. That is the answer right there.
Okay.
How the different levels of reading and the different levels of hearing, you know, even amongst us. I mean, how many devotees have actually read all of Srila Prabhupada's books? It's because if we haven't, then we're missing a lot. That's all I can say. We're missing a lot. You know, it's all there. People say, go someplace else because Prabhupada didn't give us everything. You didn't read Prabhupada's books enough. Maybe.
I have anxiety that I'm going to get to the end of my life and not having unearthed all the jewels of Bhagavatam.
Well, you're never going to do that, so be peaceful.
Okay. Thank you. So living in a place of pilgrimage, if one is traveling with their deities, does not where they are residing become a place of pilgrimage?
What if someone isn't traveling with their deities?
I see.
I mean,
so it doesn't.
How do you make a place of what becomes a place of pilgrimage?
So it's a mental attitude and absorption that creates that. It's not a physical, the physical act of carrying your deities with you. It's simply your consciousness that creates that.
Yeah, that could be. Both can be there. I'll tell a quick thing. During the summer, we go out in our Brij Bussy, and we're going to the American Himalayas, which I call it now, in the mountains of Tennessee or South Carolina, and we were camping there, and every day we took our Govardhan Shila, our deity Govardhan Shila, and we found a river or a stream or a brook or a pond, and we bathed Govardhan, and we did a kirtan, and that became a holy place because we brought Govardhan there. So even a place where devotees are having kirtan, chanting Hare Krishna, and it becomes a sanctified place because of the appearance of saintly people and Krishna consciousness. So we have to open our minds up a little. It has nothing to do with a map. Even Vrindavan, we think it's like 84 square miles. It is like infinite, you know. So we have to open our minds up to, it's not linear, the spiritual atmosphere. It's all pervasive. I don't know, that's my take on it. And Pati, you have something else to say about that?
If we look at the verse, we can see that these 5 things that Lord Chaitanya stressed, also mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion, to serve the devotees of the Lord, to chant Hare Krishna, to hear Srimad-Bhagavatam, worship the deity of the Lord, and to live in a place of pilgrimage. It actually, this says just by performing these 5, but in Nectar of Devotion, it says just by performing these 5 or any one of them. The points here are that these 5 activities are very conducive. They're like nourishment for one who's developing their love for Krishna. And obviously living in a place of pilgrimage, when you're in one where an entire community, town, or holy places, everybody in that place is there more or less for the same purpose of worshiping the Lord. So by being in such an atmosphere, it also enthuses everyone else, feeds off the enthusiasm produced by everyone else. So living in a place of pilgrimage is obviously encouraging. But one time Srila Prabhupada was in New York and someone asked him something like, aren't you finding it difficult to live in New York? He said, I'm not in New York, I'm in Vrindavan. Because wherever he went, he created holy places by that traveling. That was the statement by Yudhisthira to Vidura when he returned to the palace, that you are yourself a place of pilgrimage. So if we take it in the context of understanding what is a place of pilgrimage, then we can understand it from all these points of views that have been discussed. I think we should move on now because
Okay, I'm
there's
sorry.
quite a lot.
Okay, now we're gonna go nonstop.
No, not
Okay.
nonstop, but
Okay.
what we can do is transfer now that text and purport completed chapter 19. It's the end of Maitreya's first discussions, again, on the descendants of Manu, on Manu's activities. And what we're going to do is now review back to what we've read thus far from when we began in October last year, up until this point again, just to review it and go over it. And then in October, we'll start again with the next chapter, which is called Conversations between Vidura and Maitreya, where Vidura will inquire from Maitreya, further asking for further information about Manu's descendants up to the point where he had just come to. So let us now go on to the next section.
Okay, sorry. So this is what happens when you go deep into Proverbs books. You could talk about it forever, but we need to talk about it forever. But okay, now let's go on. Gopa, can you read?
Yes, I can read.
Thank you, Gopaji.
Third Canto Review, chapters 1 through 4. Chapter 1, Questions by Vidura. Srimad-Bhagavatam 3:1:1. Shukadev Goswami said, after renouncing his prosperous home and entering the forest, King Vidura, the great devotee, asked this question of His Grace Maitreya Rishi. Note, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments as follows regarding the phrase, ask this question of His Grace Maitreya Rishi. In the first chapter, giving up his elder brother, Vidura departs and goes on pilgrimage. There he meets Uddhava and asks questions, though he was unsteady in hearing because of separation from the Lord. Uddhava answers 2 or 3 of the questions asked by Parikshit in the 8th chapter of the 2nd canto. Shukadev, considering that the questions of Parikshit were previously asked by Vidura to Maitreya, decided to answer Parikshit's questions by first describing the introduction which gave rise to their conversation.
So what happened here was there was actually no purport by Srila Prabhupada, but I was confused because it says, after renouncing his prosperous home and entering the forest, King Vidura, the great devotee, asked this question. And I couldn't figure out what question. So when I looked up and found Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's comments, he's explaining what Sukadev Goswami is referring to. Sukadev Goswami, if you remember from the 2nd canto, has just completed his narration of the Chatushloki. Again, the advent of Brahma, his search for his origin, the Lord revealing himself and giving him instructions how to function in the material world. Thus ended the 2nd canto. So it was several chapters prior, in chapter 8, Srila Prabhupada, in chapter 8, it's called Questions by Parikshit, which inspired Sukadev to speak on those topics. And he asked so many different questions that now Sukadev is continuing his line of answers. And in order to do that, he's going to go into a thread where he's going to describe these whole topics of questions to Vidura and questions to Maitreya, which were similar to the questions that Parikshit asked. So he's actually going to answer the questions, again, back to the parampara dynamic. He's going to answer the questions of Parikshit by quoting these 2 previous examples.
Quoting from authority. Wonderful. Gopal, would you continue, please?
Okay, Srimad-Bhagavatam 3:1-2 through 23. Duryodhana insulted Vidura, so Vidura gave up family and went on pilgrimage. Vidura said, you must now return the legitimate share to Yudhisthira, who has no enemies and who has been forbearing through untold sufferings due to your offenses. He's waiting with his younger brothers, among whom is the revengeful Bhima, breathing heavily like a snake. Surely you are afraid of him. Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, has accepted the sons of Prita as his kinsmen, and all the kings of the world are with Lord Sri Krishna. He is present in his home with all his family members, the kings and princes of the Yadu dynasty, who have conquered an unlimited number of rulers, and he is their lord. You are maintaining offense personified, Duryodhana, as your infallible son, but he is envious of Lord Krishna. And because you are thus maintaining a non-devotee of Krishna, you are devoid of all auspicious qualities. Relieve yourself of this ill fortune as soon as possible and do good to the whole family.
Wow. Okay. Okay, Ian, thank you. Thank you, Gopa. We're going to just run through this a little quicker. Ian, could you read?
Krishna, am I hearing?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna, Ian.
While speaking, should continue from there?
Yes,
While
we're
speaking
here.
thus, okay. While speaking thus, Vidura, whose personal character was esteemed by respectable persons, was insulted by Duryodhana, who was swollen with anger and whose lips were trembling. Duryodhana was in company of Karna, his younger brothers, and his maternal uncle, Shakuni, who asked him to come here, the son of a kept mistress. He's so crooked that he spies in the interest of the enemy against those on whose support he has grown up. Toss him out of the place immediately and leave him with only his breath. Just being pierced by arrows through his ears and afflicted the core of his heart, he placed his bow on the door and pricked his brother's face. Bodies rather. He was not sorry, for he considered the acts of the external energy to be supreme.
God, thank you. Okay, that we're not going to talk about this yet because we want to just continue real quick. Vaishnav is not. Faye, you want to continue reading? Thank you, Ian. Stay tuned because, okay.
Just to interrupt for a second before, you can see what I've done is just made outlines of the topics and then chose a few of the select verses which explain this concept to help us understand how the narration goes.
Okay. Faye?
Verses 24 through 25. Vidura meets Uddhava. Thereafter he passed through very wealthy provinces like Surat, Sarvira, and Matsya, and through western India, known as Kurajangala. At last he reached the bank of the Yamuna, where he happened to meet Uddhava, the great devotee of Lord Krishna. Then, due to his great love and feeling, Vidura embraced him. Uddhava, who was a constant companion of Lord Krishna and formerly a great student of Vrihaspati's, Vidura then asked him for news of the family of Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Verses 26 to 45. Vidura inquires about the well-being of Lord Krishna and many other yadus who were previously known to him. The appearance of the Lord is manifested for the annihilation of the upstarts. His activities are transcendental and are enacted for the understanding of all persons. Otherwise, since the Lord is transcendental to all material modes, what purpose could he serve by coming to earth? O my friend, please therefore chant the glories of the Lord, who is meant to be glorified in the places of pilgrimage. He is unborn, and yet he appears by his causeless mercy upon the surrendered rulers of all parts of the universe. Only for their interest did he appear in the family of his unalloyed devotees, the Yadus.
Thank you, Faye. We're going to go on with Tisha, but I think it's important that everyone actually focuses on these verses because this is a really wonderful review. For me, it was really, really succinct, and it brought me right up to the present time of where we are in the Bhagavatam. So we'll continue now. Chapter 2, Remembrance of Lord Krishna. Faye, can you read?
Actually,
Oh, sorry.
just to give a synopsis. So chapter 1 was questions by Vidura, but we see basically he left home, he traveled and met Uddhava, and then he asked a whole bunch of questions about people that he knew and that Uddhava knew together, just as a summary of the entire chapter.
Good. Do that after each time we read something. That would be good. All right.
Now, you got me confused because you said Faye, but then you said Tisha. So who's reading?
Faye just read. Tisha is reading. Right? You just read Faye, right? Yeah, she did. Tisha?
Okay, thank you. Chapter 2, Remembrance of Lord Krishna. This is 3:2-1-6. Sri Sukadev Goswami said, when the great devotee Uddhava was asked by Vidura to speak on the messages of the dearest Lord Krishna, Uddhava was unable to answer immediately due to his excessive anxiety at the remembrance of the Lord. He was one who, even in his childhood at the age of 5 years, was so absorbed in the service of Lord Krishna that when he was called by his mother for morning breakfast, he did not wish to have it. Uddhava thus served the Lord continually from childhood, and in his old age, that attitude of service never slackened. As soon as he was asked about the message of the Lord, he at once remembered all about him. For a moment, he remained dead silent, and his body didn't move. He became absorbed in the nectar of remembering the Lord's lotus feet in devotional ecstasy, and he appeared to be going increasingly deeper into that ecstasy. It was so observed by Vidura that Uddhava had all the transcendental bodily changes due to total ecstasy, and he was trying to wipe away tears of separation from his eyes. Thus, Vidura could understand that Uddhava had completely assimilated extensive love for the Lord. The great devotee Uddhava soon came back from the abode of the Lord to the human plane, and wiping his eyes, he awakened his reminiscence of the past and spoke to Vidura in a pleasing mood.
Okay. Madhurya? Thank you, Tisha.
I don't think Nanda's read.
Huh? Nanda's not going to read, she said. The ones who I'm not calling on they've asked not to read. So,
Okay, Bhagavatam 3:2-7-34. Vidura remembers pastimes of Krishna and Vrindavan and informs Vidura about Yadu's disappearance. Shri Uddhava said, my dear Vidura, the sun of the world, Lord Krishna, has set, and our house has now been swallowed by the great snake of time. What can I say to you about our welfare? The personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, being prayed to by Brahma to bring welfare to the earth, was begotten by Vasudeva in the womb of his wife Devaki in the prison of the king of Bhoja. Thereafter his father, being afraid of Kamsa, brought him to the cow pastures of Maharaj Nanda, and there he lived for 11 years like a covered flame with his elder brother Baladev. In his childhood, the Almighty Lord was surrounded by cowherd boys and calves, and thus he traveled on the shore of the Yamuna River, through gardens densely covered with trees and filled with vibrations of chirping birds. When the Lord displayed his activities just suitable for childhood, he was visible only to the residents of Vrindavan. Sometimes he would cry and sometimes laugh, just like a child, and while so doing, he would appear like a lion cub.
The Bhagavatam at this point, for purposes of rasa, actually, changes directions from pastimes in Vrindavan to pastimes outside of Vrindavan. So now we'll go on to chapter 3.
Okay, Seisha, would you like to read?
Chapter 3, the Lord's pastimes out of Vrindavan. Third canto, third chapter, 25 through 28. Uddhava remembers various pastimes with the Yadus and Pandavas. Sri Uddhava said, thereafter Lord Krishna went to Mathura city with Sri Baladev, and to please their parents, they dragged Kamsa, the leader of public enemies, down from his throne and killed him, pulling him along the ground with great strength. The Lord learned all the Vedas with their different branches simply by hearing them once from his teacher, Sandipani Muni, whom he rewarded by bringing back his dead son from the region of Yamaloka. Attracted by the beauty and fortune of Rukmini, the daughter of King Bhishmaka, many great princes and kings assembled to marry her. But Lord Krishna stepping over the other hopeful candidates, carried her away as his own share, as Garuda carried away nectar. By subduing 7 bulls whose noses were not pierced, the Lord achieved the hand of Princess Nagnajiti in the open competition to select her bridegroom. Although the Lord was victorious, his competitors asked the hand of the princess, and thus there was a fight. Well equipped with weapons, the Lord killed or wounded all of them, but he himself was not hurt.
Amazing. Thank you, Sesha. We're just going to go on now with Chitamayi reading the next passage.
Then, O Vidura, the Lord caused all the kings, both the enemies and those on the side of your fighting nephews, to be killed in the battle of Kurukshetra. All those kings were so great and strong that the earth seemed to shake as they traversed the war field. Duryodhana was bereft of his fortune and duration of life because of the intricacy of ill advice given by Karna, Dushashan, and Shobala. When he lay on the ground with his followers, his thighs broken, although he was powerful, the Lord was not happy to see the scene. After the end of the battle of Kurukshetra, the Lord said, the abatement of the earth's great burden, 18 Akshahinis. Thank you, Akshahinis, has now been effected with the help of Drona, Bhishma, Arjuna, and Bhima. But what is this? There is still the great strength of the Yadu dynasty born of myself, which may be a more unbearable burden. When they quarrel among themselves, influenced by intoxication, with their eyes red like copper because of drinking madhu, then only will they disappear. Otherwise, it will not be possible. On my disappearance, this incident will take place. Lord Sri Krishna, thus thinking to himself, established Maharaj Yudhisthira in the position of supreme control of the world in order to show the ideal of administration on the path of piety. The embryo of Purush descendant begotten by the great hero Abhimanyu in the womb of Uttara, his wife, was burnt by the weapon of the son of Drona. But later, he was again protected by the Lord.
So at this point, Vidura we just did it quite quickly, but he's remembered the Lord's pastimes, entered into them, remembered the Vrindavan pastimes, the Mathura pastimes, the Dwarka pastimes. Now, although this chapter 4 is titled Vidura Approaches Maitreya, That actually doesn't happen until the very last verses of the chapter. Don't even remember if it happened in this chapter. But what this picture shows is that we just read about, or we'll read now, how the Lord is planning to leave and wind up his pastimes. And at that time, just at the time when he was about to leave, he went to a banyan tree, Timprabhakshetra, and sat down. And by Krishna's arrangement, well, Yogamaya's arrangement, Uddhava came and inquired from him. So they had very intimate talks. Just before he's going to leave this world, he's leaving instructions with Uddhava. And by chance, Maitreya came and overheard this conversation. So that's where we're headed in now in chapter 4.
Okay, thank you. Ian, are you there, Prabhu? Can you read?
Okay.
Okay, read, but Prabhu, read loud and slow.
Okay. Foreseeing the end of the Yadu dynasty,
We can't hear you,
We can't
Ian.
hear you, Ian.
Now?
We cannot hear you.
How about now?
A little bit
A
better.
little better, a little better.
Let me see. Is this any better now?
Yeah, yes,
Okay,
that's better.
That's better. Loud and slowly, Prabhu.
Okay. The descendants of Vishnu and Moja, being permitted by the Brahmanas, partook of the remnants of prasad and also drank liquor made of rice. By drinking, they all became believers, and bereft of knowledge, they touched the cores of each other's hearts with harsh words. As by the friction of bamboos, destruction takes place. So also at sunset, by interaction of the forms of intoxication, or the minds became unbalanced and destruction took place. The personality embodied Lord Shri Krishna, after foreseeing the end of his family by his internal potency, went to the bank of the river Saraswati, sipped water, and sat down on the
Thank you. Thank you. That was perfect. Thank you. Keep it the way it is now. So that was really good. Thank you. Okay. Gopa, do you want to read?
Yeah. Let's see. I have to move the picture. Srimad-Bhagavatam 349, 320. Maitreya Muni arrives and overhears the conversation between the Lord and Uddhava. The Lord was sitting, taking rest against a young banyan tree, with his right lotus foot on his left thigh. And although he had left all household comforts, he looked quite cheerful in that posture. At that time, after traveling in many parts of the world, Maitreya, a great devotee of the Lord and friend and well-wisher of the great sage Krishna Dvaipanya Vyas, reached that spot out of his own perfect accord. Maitreya Muni was greatly attached to him, the Lord, and he was listening in a pleasing attitude, with his shoulder lowered, with a smile and a particular glance upon me. Having allowed me to rest, the Lord spoke as follows. The Lord had explained, O Uddhava, in the lotus millennium, in the days of yore, at the beginning of the creation, I spoke unto Brahma, who was situated on the lotus that grows out of my navel, about my transcendental glories, which the great sages describe as Srimad-Bhagavatam.
Okay, thank you. Go on with the next one.
Uddhava said, O Vidura, when I was thus favored at every moment by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and addressed by him with great affection, my words failed in tears and the hairs on my body erupted. I asked him, my Lord, kindly explain to us, if you think us competent to receive it, that transcendental knowledge which gives enlightenment about yourself and which you explained before to Brahmaji. When I thus expressed my heartfelt desires unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the lotus-eyed Lord instructed me about his transcendental situation. I have studied the path of understanding self-knowledge from my spiritual master, the personality of Godhead. And thus, after circumambulating him, I have come to this place, very much aggrieved, due to separation.
Okay, before we go on with Jaishi reading, Tisha, did you have a question? Thank
Yes.
you, Gopaji.
Yes, I have
Yeah,
a question. So at this point, Krishna is instructing Uddhava. How is Yoga Maya involved in this conversation? Like, is Yoga Maya gone now? And Krishna is
Yoga Maya is always present when Krishna is present. She's arranging the situation. She's the entity that arranges the situation. What actually are you referring to, Yoga Maya?
Well, maybe I have it wrong, but when we talked last week about how Dhruva Maharaj was saying, no, Krishna is fully involved in the pastimes. He's fully experiencing the pastimes with in his life. So at this point, Krishna is explaining to Uddhava, but he's explaining like, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Yoga, go on, Patsy.
I think I understand what you're asking. The point we were discussing before was in his form of a boar or in his form of a little boy running from his mother. The Lord is totally absorbed in those pastimes, not considering himself the Supreme Lord and understanding his omnipotent situation. Yes. But you're seeing that here, we're seeing here, he's sitting here about to wind up his pastimes and speaking with Uddhava in his transcendental method, remembering his past talks with Brahma as the Supreme Lord, talking about the universe growing out of his navel. So yes, in this way, he's winding up those pastimes. So he's coming out of that consciousness that was previously enjoying his wives and family members in Dwarka and about to close this pastime. So he's also transforming his own consciousness as he's about to leave the world. Good question. Does that answer it?
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Prabhu. That's wonderful.
Yeah. That also shows that Krishna, according to the circumstance that actually is created by him, he adjusts everything. Even in relation to us, he is there fully for us little weenies. You know, he's there fully for us, and he's talking about the absolute truth to Uddhava. He's like fully there, and Yoga Maya is present when he's involved in a pastime that is necessary for him to forget that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not due to ignorance; it's just due to a different mood. Very good, thank you.
One point that also might be noted: Yoga Maya is kind of an umbrella topic or an umbrella definition for the internal potency of the Lord. It's not the external potency. The material modes and those are not, that's Mahamaya. So even in the categories of Yoga Maya, they're just like with energy. There are different frequencies, different phases, different influences. So sometimes it's just called Yoga Maya, but the Lord's internal potency, Yoga Maya, is always with him. That's all that's there in his world.
That's all that's there? What do you mean that's all that's there?
He's not influenced by Mahamaya whatsoever.
Right. No, he's not. Okay, good. All right, we're going to finish up this section with Jaishi concluding with these verses.
Srimad-Bhagavatam 3:4-21 to 37. Vidura requests Uddhava to instruct him, but Uddhava advises him to approach Maitreya. Vidura said, O Uddhava, because the servants of Vishnu, the Lord, wander in the interest of serving others, it is quite fit that you kindly describe the self-knowledge with which you have been enlightened by the Lord himself. Sri Uddhava said, you may take lessons from the great learned sage Maitreya, who is nearby and who is worshipable for reception of transcendental knowledge. He was directly instructed by the personality of Godhead while he was about to quit this mortal world. Shukadeva Goswami said, O king, after thus discussing the Vidura transcendental name, fame, qualities, etc. on the bank of the Jamuna. Uddhava was overwhelmed with great affliction. He passed the night as if it were a moment, and thereafter he went away. Vidura also heard from Uddhava about the appearance and disappearance of Lord Krishna, the Supersoul, in the mortal world, which is a subject matter sought after with great perseverance by the great sages. Understanding that he was remembered by Lord Krishna while quitting this world, Vidura began to cry loudly, overwhelmed by ecstatic ecstasy of love, by the ecstasy of love. After passing a few days on the bank of the river Jamuna, Vidura, the self-realized soul, reached the bank of the Ganges, where the great sage Maitreya was situated.
Unmute, Sam.
I just want to bring up one point before you give your review about this, how wonderfully charming it is that Vidura, that Uddhava does not want to instruct Vidura. And that's like the height of Vaishnava etiquette, because Vidura was senior than him. And it was also in the presence, Maitreya wasn't there, but it was, so he had to refer him to someone who was qualified. And he just would, aside from being emotionally distraught, but it was not proper for him to, not proper etiquette for him to describe to Uddhava and teach him like that. Patti, you want to continue with your just analysis of these last verses before we have an open discussion?
No, I think what you just said was beautiful. Now we see that now we've come to the point now in the narration where Vidura has had his conversations with Uddhava and now is going to Maitreya. But one verse that was interesting, it said that understanding he was remembered by Lord Krishna while quitting this world, Vidura began to cry loudly, overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love. It appears that Uddhava, while he was speaking with the Lord and Maitreya was nearby, the Lord also understood that Maitreya would be meeting with Vidura and left instructions and instructed Uddhava and Maitreya accordingly so that Vidura could receive these specific instructions when he meets Maitreya, which is kind of like a hors d'oeuvre to what's about to come. It whets our appetite.
In that same light, when we see things happening in the world and to our own individual selves, we can also understand that this is Krishna's arrangement for us to become devotees, to deepen our relationship with him, whether it's appearingly something that's not so nice, distasteful, maybe even tragic. All of this is to urge the receptive soul to come to his lotus feet. So that's also a very special little secret. This is reading deeply into it, how Krishna's plan is always there for each one of us, just as it was for Vidura to hear from Maitreya. We just have to have the eyes to see it. Seshaji.
Unmute, Prabhu.
I'm just wondering about the amount of time that was passing here. Krishna was talking with Uddhava. Maitreya came up, but when Uddhava advises Vidura to go to Maitreya, Maitreya is already some distance away. What kind of time frame between these different conversations is there?
It doesn't appear like it's very long at all. Uddhava had just left Prabhas, Kshetra, and Dwarka. He was on his way to Badrik Ashram. I mean, we could say it's probably a few months. It's a long way. It's maybe 1,000 miles to the Jamuna River from Dwarka. So he's going to the north. He's come to the Jamuna, and that's where he's met Vidura, who has been on pilgrimage now for a really long time, because he left the palace way prior to the Battle of Kurukshetra, which happened years ago. So he's been on pilgrimage for a long time. And then he meets Uddhava. Then after, as we just read, after Uddhava leaves, Vidura shortly thereafter left, and then he just went to Hardwar. And from Vrindavan to Hardwar is maybe a week or two's walk. Not that far along. It's 4 hours to Delhi by car and then 8 hours to Hardwar by train. So in today's modern transport, you can go from the Jamuna River to Badrika Ashram, to Hardwar in a day. So it probably took him a week or two to travel, and then we'll hear him meet Maitreya there in Hardwar.
Yeah, things took a long time because everybody was walking. There was no transport. Thank you. Anyone else have something to say before we close up until next week?
And next week, remember, the course materials, if everybody wants to take advantage of them, they're in a similar format of an outline of the upcoming chapters where Vidura meets Maitreya, Maitreya instructs him, and then finally the last week, we'll again revert back to these descriptions of the pastimes of Lord Varaha.
Okay, this is what an achievement, actually. I think I want to really honor everyone who partook in this. Because there's so many things distracting us in this world, to actually dedicate this time to reading the Bhagavatam, which is like Krishna incarnate. It is so, this is for people who actually want to know about the spiritual world and get out of the material world. So thank you for your association. And we look forward to hearing from you online, writing some transcendental nectar in relation to the forums, and also seeing you next week. Hare Krishna,
Hare
glories
Krishna,
to
everyone.
Prabhupada. Hare Bol, Hare Krishna.
Vanchakalpatubhishcha.
Namo Namaha.
Krishna, good week, everybody.
Go, Premanande!
Go, Premanande. Jai Srila Prabhupada.